Guys, welcome to the Vlad Catcher Show, the number one show for founders, execs, and entrepreneurs who are scaling their businesses. And our guest today is Edward Norton, the incredible actor, four-time Academy Award nominee, successful entrepreneur. And in this video, we're going to talk about his new business, which is called Zeck. Edward, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Vlad.
So tell us, Edward, what is Zeck and how did it come about? What's the origin story?
You know, people can be forgiven for wondering why would I get involved in a corporate governance software platform. Like, I definitely I definitely have had friends tell me, you know, you've got a pretty interesting day job. Like, why would you spend any particular time on this? But you know, my own journey with starting companies, being an entrepreneur, coming up with ideas and working with friends has almost always not so much been a function of like, I don't know, an ambition to start a company or something. It's been mostly the perception of a problem. You know, like it's usually flowed out of sitting around with friends and allies and realizing that we perceive a failure or something that we wish could be better, and because I'm creative and I think that the creative act of figuring things out is a different kind of creativity that I respond to. I have tended to get involved with enterprises that felt to me like a creative way to address something that I felt a need for myself, right? So I don't I don't need to do it, but I like to do it when I feel that we're solving a problem. And you know, the first company I started called CrowdRise, which became part of GoFundMe, was a fundraising software platform for charities, and it grew out of the fact that I ran the New York Marathon, and I was trying to build a team fundraising page to use social media and share with our friends, and there just weren't good ones. Like there were really not good ones. So with my friends, we built our own web-based fundraising page, and it was so successful. People asked us if they could use it, and it grew up and out of there. It was very organic, you know. And Zeck was a similar situation. I'm 55 years old. Since I was in my early 20s, even in my theater company, we had a board. You know, I've been involved in boards of organizations, both nonprofit and corporate, for almost 30 years. And decades now of watching and experiencing the dynamic of organizations and this weird feature of organizations, which is the idea of a board of directors, and the way that a management team, the people who are actually running an organization, interact with that other group that's notionally supposed to be supportive, and you know, augmenting the organization, and seeing how often that relationship turned sour. Time was wasted on both sides of the table, and it was really dysfunctional, was really starting to kind of bother me and my friends Robert and Jeffrey. And we were laughing, but we also started kind of debating why does this happen so often? What is it that makes so many board meetings such an unpleasant experience for all involved? And the more we started thinking about it, the more we started feeling that we sort of knew what was needed, and Zeck grew up and out of a desire to turn something that's you know, we think kind of a ubiquitous problem with companies and organizations into something positive. You know, it was something we got sick of ourselves, and we got sick of the really you know, 1990s software tools that are available, and we just decided we're going to build this ourselves.
I'm just summarizing, which is felt the problem yourself, had deep kind of expertise in the field because you've been in many boards, felt the problem and wanted to solve this problem because no one was addressing it, right?
The funny thing is, you could say, I mean, when you listen to it from the outside, and I hear myself saying it sometimes, you say like, wait, a software for helping organizations deal with board meetings or investor updates or financing pitch decks, these kinds of things. They're like, that's so down in the weeds. But if you think about it, there's 2 million nonprofit organizations in the United States, right? And there's tens of millions of companies, literally. And every single one of them, even at kind of the venture phase, early startup phase, these days with venture capital, et cetera, the average company is going to average between 5 and 10 people on a board. And a nonprofit organization or a big company might get to substantially more than that. So you're literally talking about tens of millions of people in the United States alone probably have this experience. They either work for a company and they have to stop what they're doing to prepare for the board meeting, or they're on a board or something. So it's not as niche to kind of the audience that your audience or stuff like that. It's actually many tens of millions of people in our society are are actually inside this dynamic. And so to us, it's sort of like it may sound niche, but we actually think it affects the quality of the relationship people have with their work, right? And nobody think about this too, like you're a young person, you work at a company, you're someone you founded your own company and you're excited about the mission, you're excited about the work, you like the thing. And 4 to 8 times a year, you all go pencils down to prepare for what most entrepreneurs would say feels like an exam to them, or feels like a quiz or a review, right? And they begin to resent it. And the period which they tell everyone at the company, okay, put your pencils down and work on preparing for this, feels like drudge work. Nobody sets out as an entrepreneur with the aspiration to like build the best board presentation, right? That's not how anybody wants to spend their time. And so like we feel like this is something that's actually negatively affecting people's relationship to the work that they're doing. Like they don't want to spend their time doing this. And then almost like the old taxi cartel system being improved by ride hail, like instead of positive interpersonal dynamics with board members, they develop negative interpersonal dynamics with board members. And that's negative to their workday, negative to their mindset. So, not to sound too philosophical, but we actually think that for those in this world that you speak to, it actually has a substantive kind of quality. It's not just quantitative time savings. It's like a qualitative relationship. It affects the qualitative relationship people have with their work.
And several times a year. So it's not actually as niche because everyone has to have it. Everyone has it several times a year. You mentioned like 4 to 8 times. That's actually a big thing, Edward. That's cool. That's huge. Actually,
Yeah,
the potential is huge.
yeah. And also it's one of these strange things, right? You do this forum. You've created this forum for speaking to people about being an entrepreneur, right? Like being a founder. And it's cool. I think in the modern era, we're getting better and better at best practices, forums like this for idea sharing, right? But young people sharing ideas, optimizing with each other, learning from each other, right? But there's no manual, right? And something that's really weird is a lot of people by default, they start a company, they take investment money, maybe, and by default, they accept this paradigm where they have to have a board, right? And they don't really know anything about it. There is no playbook for how you're supposed to handle that relationship, right? And so what do you start doing? You start using PowerPoint slides, literally software that got developed in the 90s, right? We're still in some very bad received habits. We haven't really reformed. Like if I said to you today, Vlad, like to anyone listening to this, if you said, hey, how do you manage your cap table? Nobody would say on an Excel spreadsheet using law firms anymore. You would say, oh, we use Carta. Or you would say things. We've reformed. If I said to you, hey, we need to get signatures around to investors or whatever, nobody would expect a FedEx package to arrive with yellow sticky tabs
Yeah,
sticking out of it. You would get it in DocuSign.
yeah.
We've radically reformed certain old, inefficient practices. But on this one, we really haven't changed it at all. Everybody's running the exact same playbook that they've been running, since the mid 50s, like literally and it's time for not only completely reforming the tools that we use, but I think like helping younger people that are starting companies rethink how do you communicate across this, what is this relationship for? Like, do I control it or do they control it? And if I want to control it, what do I have to do when I start my company to set the rules of engagement of what, not just what the board expects of me when I report to them, but what I expect of them, you know? And that, and I think that's a thing that doesn't get talked about enough, which is young people starting companies. I always say, create a reciprocal obligation immediately between you and your board. Do not make it that they believe you owe them a report. Make it that they know you expect them to have deliverables and to contribute as well, or there's no reason for them to be there, right? And and in a funny way, the way you present the materials can even affect that. And just like we were talking about, you'd never send a FedEx with signature pages, legal documents, right? Think about this today. You're a dynamic leader of a company or something. You want to send something out to people. You either want to send a financing pitch deck, you want to send an investor update, or very significantly, you want to send information about the company around to your board. It's in 2025, the idea that you would send that in a PDF that people on their phone have to pinch scroll in to read a financial report, that they can't read it like Axios or the New York Times on their mobile device. But more significantly, why should you, as the team that put this together, be blind as to the interactivity? You should be able to see not just did Edward read what you sent him, but how much time did he spend in each section? And did he do the pre-vote approvals that you need, et cetera? Why should you walk into a meeting totally blind as to how people digested the material that you sent out? Why should you have to read them verbatim the slide presentation that you already sent them, which is what happens in 95% of board meetings? A management team spends 2 weeks preparing, sends it out, and then goes into the room and reads them the same presentation. It's insane. And that's a function of fixed slide decks being the default, or board repository, things. And it's just, this is like crazy. This is as crazy as using an Excel spreadsheet to do a cap table now, and I think we feel that the coming generation of new companies is going to throw away the old and get over onto something new like Zeck.
Edward, so you made the whole board meeting actually way more productive for everyone involved, for the CEO, for the leadership, and for the board members, because as you mentioned, right, the founder knows, or the CEO knows, if they read it, that means he doesn't have to go over the same pitch deck again. So like
That's right.
You've made the whole board meeting of the company way more effective.
Think about it this way. The company's got a job to do. They want to run their company. They don't want to do board meetings. So on their side, like Zeck uses AI very effectively in a clean room siloed thing with your data, but it helps you write your board presentation. Where most of the CEOs and CFOs who use Zeck say it reduces their preparatory time for a board meeting by 80%.
Wow.
So that's massive. Now, secondarily, we did some studies and stuff. We estimate that the average corporate board meeting of any company, any size, they spend 45 minutes to an hour on voting, or voting for minutes approvals of the last meeting, voting for employee stock option agreements, voting for non-core strategy kind of matters, right? An hour. The management doesn't need to spend this time, and the people on your board are busy people. They're they don't need to spend this time. So in Zeck, all of the governance can be pre-voted. It's all mounted by the law firms, and it's approved by the law firms. So you can pre-vote employee stock option things, minutes approvals, all this stuff. So just by demanding of your board, you do the read. We can see if you did the read, and you have to do your homework. You have to read the voting items and pre-do your voting. You show up and one board member hasn't done the homework, they're going to look like an idiot. And that's the kind of reciprocity and transparency that you want. So we're stripping out like a lot of the drudgery that goes on in the meetings and putting it over into stuff people can do in the airport terminal, right? But the other big one is exactly what you said. If you can see what people have already digested, and better yet, if I send you a meeting, Vlad, and you're going through the financials and you have a question, why should you have to wait for the meeting? You should be able to iterate, write a private or to the whole board question in the platform, say, hey, I just want a clarification, get that clarification. You just stripped like 40 minutes of useless questions that could have been answered on the fly during the read process. So again, cloud-based, iterative, transparent, analytic generating, all of these things should be what a management team expects by default, so that they're not using some fixed slide deck that leaves them blind and wastes everybody's time. You know what I mean? It's just people's time is too precious, and there's no reason to spend like half of the time that's spent in average board meetings doing things that could have been taken care of, and what we find, what people report is like, what's the end result you're looking for? If people are going to get together, you don't really want to be focused on the rearview mirror. You want people to have read it, digested it. You want to talk about the forward plan. You want to talk about, what do we need from you? What are we doing? How should we address this? And one of our big kind of qualitative agendas is say, how do you make a company's board meeting be forward looking, tactical, strategic, as opposed to rearward looking, right? And that has to do, I think, with what the tools allow the management team to expect from their board in the pre-meeting.
So cool. It's kind of like even changes the way you look at board meetings, because in the past some companies might look at it like a hall monitor type of meeting. You're saying
Totally.
Look at it forward, not a hall monitor meeting, but look at it how you could take the business forward. That's a whole different way of looking at the board meeting.
Yeah, and we build some philosophical cues into it too, because I really believe after lots of time, I've had great, Fred Wilson was the famous VC, was at Union Square, was on our board at CrowdRise. He was like A++. He was the best board member. We loved him. We loved our time with him. He was, so that's like an A+ experience. And I've been on other boards where there are board members who literally see like they're doing nothing but monitoring their investment. They're not there to help at all. And it's really annoying, right? Like I don't think that there's one I know a very well-known venture capital investor who never sits on boards. And I said, that's so interesting. What? And he said, if I feel I need to monitor my investment, then I don't have enough conviction in the management team. You know what I mean? He's like, it's actually a metric in my investment. If I feel I need to be on the board, then I don't have, then I don't trust them enough. Like, you should be on a board because you want to contribute proactively to the mission of the organization, or you feel you can. But I think that we like to build in even cues to a management team, like we think every board meeting should have as an intrinsic part of it that every board member says what their action item is before the next meeting, right? It shouldn't be what here's management's delivery. It's like go around the table, and if there's a board member who can't say what they're going to be doing to advance the mission of the company on some level, then they don't belong on that board.
So I want to just kind of summarize some of these cool features, right? Because Zeck has many cool features that you mentioned. One is the ability for CEOs to see, who read the board deck, how long they read the board deck, right? That's one. Very valuable.
Yeah, analytics. Transparency for the management team on every dimension of how your reader engaged with it. And I'll just tell you one short story that I love out of that. One company that I'm on the board of that started using Zeck, the CEO, it was actually doing a credit round, a debt fundraise, like it was raising a credit facility. And they sent it to lots of different big firms, and they got declined by this one firm that gave some very, said, well, we don't really think this and this, and we read through this, but we think these were our critiques, right? And he sent me a screenshot, and he could see that they hadn't read it, right? He could see they wrote him all this kind of mouth off kind of stuff, and he screenshotted the analytics frame showing 1 minute in summary, 000 in the sections, and just sent it back to them.
Wow.
Imagine how that feels for a management team to basically be able to call bullshit on on people who are fronting because they haven't actually done the work. You know what I mean? And how transformative that is in the sense of the, what do you as a manager go into in terms of knowing your thing, which is great. So yes, transparency, analytics, and the way that that creates reciprocal obligation is great, we think. But then, of course, time savings. And I think, the Zeck AI is really interesting. There's so much talk about what the potential negative of AI application is. But I will say this, like in my own experience to date, and Zeck AI is a good example, when like Zeck AI is not replacing anybody. It is not replacing an analyst. It's not like I said, nobody's best use of time is building a board deck. Nobody. Like no organization needs a person who's just building the board deck because it never falls to an intern anyway. It's being done by the CFO, the head counsel, the CMO. It's like top C-suite tier people are having to build that, right? So if you can have an extremely secure knowledge engine that helps you accelerate, that turns you from a writer into an editor, because what's the worst thing we all face? The blank page, right? Nobody, the blank page is just like you're a CEO and you have to, it's like, no, work with me on what I've done before and what I've communicated before. Help me accelerate that first draft. That's where we're seeing the preparatory time and also building data visuals. Like the idea that you have to use one of these, old softwares to build your own graphs. Why should anybody do that? That's a perfect use of AI. And I think Zeck AI is a great example of the transformative efficiency that's not replacing a person. What it's do is returning people's time to them for what they actually want to be doing in their job.
Yeah. Edward, that's incredible. So the analytics for the CEOs, that way you can have a proper relationship with the board members. Then you're describing like ease to make it easier for C-level execs to even create these board decks.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And on the other side of the table, let's not turn board members into villains. There are many great ones, right? Like people you're so thrilled that they would give their time to you because they're veterans, they know what they're talking about, they got great ideas, right? Why should that person, a board member on GoFundMe, who I really liked, a fellow board member, GoFundMe, he said to me, he's really diligent. He's on multiple boards. He really cares. He spends the time. He said, I just can't believe at this point in my career, I sit, grinding through employee stock option approvals, minutes approvals, these things. That's a waste of time. Like these people's time is valuable. And so if that person, if you think about the board member, so imagine the horrible experience. I had this happen recently with a nonprofit board that I'm on. I'm in the airport. About 36 hours before a meeting, I get a 98-page PDF.
Whoa.
And I'm expected to get through a 98-page PDF, and I'm on my phone and I'm like pinch zooming into the PDF to try to read detailed stuff. I can't like read it like CNN on my phone. And that's a waste of my time. That's just a waste of my time. And if I have a question, I should be able to ask it there on the fly. Like there's no reason for these things to not be cloud-based, iterative, all the things we expect these days, right? And so quality of experience and respect for time on the board member side as well is important. Like that's how, again, how do you foster positive relationships? Like what builds resentment? Waste of time builds resentment for everybody. No, and we've all been there. Like the CEO who's giving a board presentation, and people are sighing, they're leaning back, they're looking at their phone under the edge of the table. You're losing people, right? You're losing people, and nobody. You don't want mutual resentment. You want mutual support.
Yeah. My last two questions, Edward. The one, I heard you mention something really interesting at another podcast, that there are many similarities between running a business and running a movie set. Can you elaborate some on this?
I mean, movies are really weird because, like, if you think about the process of companies, there's kind of like idea, this idea just hovering in the air and feeling half baked, and it has to get articulated and written down and pitched to people and financed, and people have to get hired, and you build a whatever it is, you're a product, you have to figure out how to go to market. And then you have this like business, right? Like movies are basically like, it's like idea, pitch, financing, things, go to market um, in about a 12-month period. And you go from the idea through to the launch, release, and the ultimate outcome all in about a under 24, and then you do it again and again and again. Like making movies is basically like conceiving a new company and fully operationalizing it and seeing what its outcome is going to be every 18 months. Um, so and so one of the things that does always impress me, I think people, they see sort of certain component parts of the movie, and a movie is, even an average movie is an operation that goes from 0 people or a writer and a director, whatever, to a team of, I mean, you see those credit rolls, right? They're like, on the average movie, and I'm not even talking like some huge special effects thing where you have thousands of people who work on it, but just the average movie. I just did a film where it's just me and Seth Rogen and Penelope Cruz and Olivia Wilde, and it's one single set, one apartment, and there was at least 250 people on the crew, right? And so you go from that doesn't exist to you're fully hired up and staffed up, and you've got a 250 person operation, maybe more, and within a year you've wound it all down. You know what I mean? So and you have your equivalent roles, like y- certain types of producers are like your CFO, some are like your COO. You got directors like a CEO. You've got like, you definitely have there's a similar kind of structure of dynamics. And then you have, I don't even think people realize what a unionized industry making films is. It's like most of your crews are union members and everything's unionized. So it But then on the flip side, I don't think building companies is somehow, it's a highly creative act. Like people, oh, you do this stuff and you that. I'm like, making movies and doing companies and getting them out into the world, they're not as dissimilar as you would think. Like, if you think about what a company is, a huge amount of it is narrative, right? A huge amount of it is a story you have to tell over and over and over again. And you've got to get good at telling that story, and you've got to refine the story, and you've got to like, place it within the context of the society, and get people invested in the idea that there's a there, right? Um, and and so I think there's an enormous amount of creativity, narrative, personality, storytelling, all kinds of it in building companies as well.
So it's kind of like making a movie is kind of like a business where you go from 0 to completion in 18 months and you know the final outcome
Yeah.
of the whole thing.
Yeah, it's and then you say, let's do another one.
You do, yeah, cool.
Right. That's why I don't think people realize, like, people in movies, when they look at people like Clint Eastwood or Woody Allen or people who like literally would direct a movie a year, like some of us were like, that's not possible. Like, how could you do that? Like, you know what I mean? Like, can you imagine like starting a new company once a year?
Definitely challenge you, Greg. Yeah.
That's the other interesting thing. It kind of relates to boards, is I think I'm sure seen this now over time, but if I was going to tell myself something when I was in my late 20s, early 30s or something, if there's something I could say to myself now, it's that, like, everything's going to take longer than you think it's going to take, right? Whatever you sign up for and whatever things like, I think a lot of us in our minds, we create a mirage, which is that we're going to pull certain things off in cycles of like a couple years or like 5 years or something like that. And I think anybody who's had any measure of success with enterprises or companies, there's nothing that takes less than 10 years. And when you're younger, of course, you think time is infinite, and you think you're going to get things done in shorter periods than you end up doing, right? And I think recognizing that if you're going to do this, you should be prepared to be doing it for 10 years. You know what I mean? At least, right? Um, is a good wisdom because um, if you're in it for the wrong reasons, like if you think you're going to make a quick buck or whatever, you know what I mean? Like you better have a decent amount of conviction around your actual interest in what you're doing because you are going to be at it for a while when you go and start. When you go and start something and try to rally other people around it and the obligations that that creates and money, you'll be under it for you'll be under that for a long time.
Edward, and my last question for you, because you mentioned wisdom and you kind of walked me to my last question about wisdom. I heard in another podcast advice your grandfather gave you about starting, why you should start and run businesses, which I thought was very interesting. Can you share what he mentioned to you, that advice?
My granddad was amazing, very eccentric and very brilliant, but he told me lots of things. Which one? Which one did it?
The one I heard was about how he mentioned to you why you should start and why you should run businesses. He was talking about profits.
Yeah, no, yeah, that's actually right. My granddad was he was he was on the it was on the front page of the New York Times when he died. He was a very, very, very celebrated, not just a real estate developer, but he was an urban planner and kind of philosopher about the the lives and deaths of cities and communities and he he was very progressive. He really believed that he was a huge innovator in the realms of affordable housing finance and affordable housing development um, and holistically more inclusive cities and societies and all of these things. But he he was a capitalist. He was very much capitalist, but he also really believed in um, the obligation to reinvest in society and in our communities and things like that. And he he used to say things like that the legitimate purpose of a business is not profit; it's to provide a needed service that's that's so authentic that profit becomes the inevitable outcome. But he really didn't believe in what I would call like um just sort of looking for a clever arbitrage. You know what I mean? A narrow way to kind of cleverly lever some thing. He thought that one of the great features of American life was our capacity for self-organization and for dealing with problems because we didn't come from a feudal society or a monarchical, we built this, like, American society was kind of built in the wilderness, and it was very self-governing and famous for people self-organizing in communities to sort out their own problems. And I think he thought the best expression of American business life was kind of where we started in the beginning, like see where there are problems, see where there are things that need improvement, that have multidimensional social value, not just economic value. And if they're real, they'll people will be drawn toward them. You know what I mean? And today, like, some people might use the phrase double bottom line, right? Like can you articulate a double bottom line for what you're doing? Is there a true social value to what you're doing? Or an environmental value, or is there something that's being contributed through the business? And I think that's a nice way of looking at it. There's who is it? Is it now I can't remember if it's like Adam Grant, or it might be that guy Simon Sinek who wrote the book Infinite Game. Which have you like featured him at all? Or
No, I know him. I know his books.
Infinite Game is really, really great book for anyone, I think, setting out to build a company. I think it's a really great articulation of how to look at the landscape in which you're building your company. But I think that idea of being able to identify what the purpose of what you're doing is, apart from, the economic fundamentals of it, is a really uh, it is very wise because of the time reality. You're going to be under it for a while, and if you're really just grinding, if you're grinding for profit margin, like it can actually end up being a pretty hollow feeling. You know what I mean?
Yeah, because it's a 10-year journey, right? The journey's so long. You should have
Yeah.
a purpose. Yeah. Well, Edward, I'm so grateful you came on our show and share these amazing lessons, so many interesting tips, talked about Zeck, amazing product. Everyone sign up for Zeck. Edward, anything else you'd like to say to our viewers before we log off?
No, I think it's great. I mean, I like this. I think that I really like, I actually like forums like this for people. I think for people to, um, it's probably one of the best things about kind of our connected life. We know what the downsides are, right? The distraction. But I think it's an amazing thing. Like, I mean, I'm older than you, but like the amount of effort you had to make even, 25 years ago to find community, and I iterate ideas and share ideas and best practices. It was so much more difficult, so much more analog, so much more physical. And I think to create this kind of a forum where people can so easily kind of tune in and bounce ideas with each other, and it's great. It's really great, and I think it's always worth investing in.
Yeah, Edward, I'm a huge fan of your work, man. You actually,
Thanks, man.
you kind of made my dream come true by doing this interview. As I mentioned to you,
Thanks. I appreciate the time.
All right, Edward, thank you so much.
Have a good one.
Bye.
Talk
Bye.
soon.